It was an early start in the van that drove us to the trailhead. We were on the road before sunrise, and that was especially early for teenage me. I had never been backpacking before, but the idea of relying on the strength of my legs and the sweat from my brow to get where I wanted to go has always been alluring. So when my college offered a backpacking trip for incoming freshmen as a bonding activity, I jumped at the chance and signed up to complete a section of the Appalachian Trail. I don't remember how many miles we did, what camps we slept at, or even the names of most of my trail mates. But the experience of being completely separated from the modern world, immersed in the wilderness and beauty of the late summer mountains, that I do remember. Stumbling across a blackberry patch and eating a handful of the sweetest berries I had ever tasted, then cresting a hill to savor the kind of scenery that an artist hopes to capture. That's a foundational experience for me. I still love to backpack because, 1, I like to prove to myself that I can live without modern conveniences for a couple of days, and 2, it's my favorite way to connect with nature. There's something magical and almost spiritual about spending time in a place that is beautiful just because it is, not because somebody decided to build it. In a time where we can feel thrust into the rat race, what steps can we take to live the future that we want? Our guest this week, Jaquelyn Francis, is working to support companies trying to create a greener future. And she walks the walk, or in her case, rides the ride. When we sat down to interview Jaquelyn, she was halfway through a 600-mile bike ride in the middle of an abnormally hot summer, making a powerful statement that it's possible to travel and be mindful of your carbon footprint.
Welcome back to another episode of Conservation Connection, the show where we do exactly what it sounds like. Each week, we introduce you to people working in the field of conservation to make a difference. I'm Sarah Catherine.
And I'm Chance.
And this is the show.
So, to kick this off, Sarah Catherine, would you rather be too hot or too cold?
I would definitely rather be too cold. I'm miserable when I'm hot. Easy answer.
Yeah, I think anybody who's ever met you knows that you do not perform well at warm temperatures. You are definitely destined for colder environments, and that's one of our fundamental incompatibilities.
It's funny because I love warm environments. Like, I would much rather be at the beach or like on the ocean, on the water, than, in the mountains and the snow, as much as I love the snow. So it's weird that I'm like, I do not stand the heat very well. But if I can be in the water and the heat, then I'm okay.
See, I think that's what it boils down, is that you like to be in the water. In order to be comfortable in the water, it has to be warm outside.
Most of the times.
Yeah, I do fine with heat. I'm A-okay. I grew up in South Texas. Heat is not a problem for me. But when it hits a chilly 65, 68 degrees, I'm wearing multiple layers. I have a vest on. I've got an undershirt, fleece-lined pants, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, also makes a big difference of what is the temperature in our house set to. Lots of, these are big differences for us.
Yeah, because if you had your way, you would set it to like 45 degrees at night.
Well, that's a little extreme.
Okay,
maybe.
That was a little exaggeration.
But I do think we've come a long way since we've known each other. We've both adjusted for the better.
Marriage is about compromise, and I think we're pretty good at that.
Yeah, definitely. So really excited to interview Jaquelyn Francis this week. She is the Executive Director of Global Warming Mitigation Project and the founder of the Keeling Curve Prize, which we will obviously be talking about more in the show. Jaquelyn was just a really lovely and interesting person to talk to and hear her story, why she's passionate about what she's passionate about, and why she started these projects.
Well, I think anybody who's willing to ride an e-bike 600 miles to go present the award winners of your prize as a way to walk the walk and ride the ride, they're going to be a fun person to talk to.
Yeah. And talking about heat, she and her husband both rode that trip together. He was there to support her, help carry some of the additional gear, and they had to deal with some extreme heat. So we'll obviously get into that later in the episode.
I think what's really cool about what she does with the Global Warming Mitigation Project and the Keeling Curve Prize is it highlights that the solutions to the problems that we're facing in the environmental space already exist. People have made the innovations in technology that need to happen, really what we need to be doing is putting support behind the companies who can make the biggest change as fast as they can. And that's what her whole reason for the prize is that she's putting money into the most effective solutions for stuff like regenerative agriculture or carbon sequestration, the most effective solutions possible.
Right. It's kind of like we talked about in our episode with the Nature Conservancy, is there is a lot of progress to be made and solutions are typically already out there. They just need to be funded.
This interview with Jaquelyn was recorded this summer in Sun Valley, Idaho as part of the Sun Valley Forum. We are big fans of the Sun Valley Forum. We've been there 3 years in a row to cover some podcasts, and I just can't say enough good things about them. This year's theme was restoring harmony with nature. And what do I say all the time? That we are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature, right? And so to have the Sun Valley Forum focus on how do we as a society, as a culture, find places where we can come together with nature to grow for a better future was really cool to see a whole conference about that.
And going to places like the Sun Valley Forum really allow us to get a diverse set of interviews, right? Because it's not like it's super easy to go and interview someone in Utah and someone in Idaho and someone in Alabama or wherever, all over the place. So we really get to build these in-person connections, which we like to think make a better story for you listening. And to connect with these people and really share their stories beyond just what you're hearing on the interview. So that's always a blast, and we're excited you get to hear these episodes. Speaking of traveling, Chance has a great visitor here this week with us.
Yeah, my dad's in town. It's great. It's the first time he's come down to Columbus, Georgia since we lived here in the 90s. And I tell you, the town has changed significantly since then. He's taking a mid-afternoon nap in that room right over there. So he's going to love hearing this when he wakes up. But yeah, it's good to have Dad in town. I love my family, and we kind of are scattered all over the country. So it's fun to get to see everybody.
Yeah, it's really funny when we ended up moving to Columbus. Like Chance said, he lived here in the 90s for literally 1 year. His dad was in the Air Force, so mostly they were lucky enough to stay in one place. But 1 year they were here in Columbus, Georgia. So when we moved here, people would ask us, why did you want to live in Columbus? Because it's kind of an up-and-coming town, and we, as outsiders, saw a lot of the growth that's happening here. But I think that people who have lived here, all their lives are like, why would someone move here? I don't get it. So they would be like, are you from here? Are you military? Because we have a big military base. But the answer was always no, we just think it's a really cool town. It's by the river. But funny enough, Chance did live here for 1 year when he was in second grade or something.
Very briefly. Yep. Mm-hmm. It was a cool place. I like Columbus. 10 out of 10. I think we would be remiss if we didn't say something this week, encouraging you to get out and go vote if you haven't done so. If you live in the United States and you're registered to vote, please go vote in this election. It's the coolest thing you can do for the future of America is go out and exercise your democratic right. There's lots of people in the world that don't get to do that. So make a plan. This is a big one. So get out and vote.
Yeah, definitely go exercise that power that you have. Something interesting that I learned is that only 3 states don't have early voting. I just kind of assumed that was an everywhere thing because seems like it would make the line shorter and all of that. But yeah, so if you can early vote, go do it. Lines are hopefully shorter where you are. They definitely were for us when we got out to vote.
Yeah, I think it was 10 minutes here in Georgia when we were voting. It was not bad at all.
Pretty simple right now. And with that, let's get to the show.
We are so excited today to be sitting here in Sun Valley for the 3rd year in a row and sitting across the table with Jaquelyn Francis, who is the executive director of the Global Warming Mitigation Project, and she's the visionary founder behind the Keeling Curve Prize, which you just presented yesterday here at Sun Valley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I guess with that note, let's start with what is the Keeling Curve Prize?
So the Keeling Curve Prize is a award that we give out annually. It's $50,000 per winner, and we picked 10 winners. We had a pool of 500 applicants, and the application starts on November 1st. We award the prize in 5 different categories. It's carbon sinks, which are both natural and engineered; energy, which is about energy poverty around the world and places that need energy solutions, plus innovative energy; finance, which is about creating new financial mechanisms in the decarbonization space; social and cultural pathways, which can be anything from education to podcasts; and transport and mobility, which is all kinds of ways to decarbonize our transportation systems.
Amazing. So what I'm hearing is that we need to apply next year for the podcast. So what inspired you to create this? And more than that, what inspired the categories?
So I went back to school and got a master's when I was about 50 years old. And when I was taking the courses while getting my master's, I was just like, we have hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of climate solutions around the world that are not getting enough attention. And I decided that this would be a good way to amplify and elevate and scale up climate solutions around the world. And I had a background working for the Aspen Science Center, so I had connections in the scientific world. And I put together a really strong climate advisory group. And we got together and discussed what are the things that need to get the most visibility in this space, and what do we need to actually amplify and scale up in the climate world in order to create the future that we're looking for beyond fossil fuels. With decarbonization is a part of innovation and also a part of getting back to our natural systems that work to create carbon balance.
If somebody on the street walked up to you and said, "What is decarbonization?" What does that mean? Could you explain that for me?
Oh, yeah, I can. Pretty simply in basic terms, too, is that the world, the Earth, has this natural carbon balance. And we've been in a place where our atmosphere has about 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that's been balanced because, we release this carbon when things decompose, and then it becomes reabsorbed when trees grow, and there's been this natural carbon balance. And because we're burning fossil fuels and other agricultural parts of the agricultural industry are creating more of these greenhouse gases to go into the atmosphere, that's created an unbalance. And now we currently sit at around 420 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's out of balance. So decarbonizing is actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and stopping the systems that are creating this unbalance to get back into an equilibrium in our systems.
Yeah, because all of the carbon that is on planet Earth has been here forever. We're not getting new carbon from outside of the planet. The question is, where is that carbon? If we simplify it down to, there's 100 carbon atoms on the planet. Let's say 90 of those traditionally are locked up in something solid like living matter or buried underground, stones, etc., and 10 of those are in the air. Well, we've been taking carbon out of the ground for a very long time in the form of gasoline, oil, fossil fuels, and burning it and turning it into gas. So instead of it being a 90-10 split, now it's maybe more like an 85-15 split. And that doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but when that carbon hangs out in the atmosphere, it really heats things up and it traps a lot of energy, and that increases the likelihood of stuff like major weather events, other issues like that. So not only do we have to stop putting carbon out into the atmosphere, but we also have to find solutions to pull it out of the atmosphere as well.
Yes, that's very, very good way of putting it. I think of the carbon dioxide and methane as being like flippers in a pinball game. And they're up there flipping the heat back towards us. And there's just too many flippers putting the heat back towards us right now. And we actually need to pull these out of the air, as you said, and get back into a balance where our natural systems are working, within the way that they allow for us to survive on this planet the way we have for millions of years.
I love that metaphor. The idea of heat trying to escape the earth and these flippers stopping it from escaping is an excellent metaphor. I love that.
One of the applicants that we saw last night, it was something about basically how I understood it was crushing up rocks to help remove carbon from the atmosphere, right? Could you explain that? Because I had never heard of that before, and I guess it's been around or is maybe a newer thing, but I was like, what is this? Like crushing up rocks?
Now, there are certain things in our world that do absorb carbon, and it takes a long, long time because it's sort of part of the weathering process. And, lots of things absorb carbon. In fact, the ocean is the biggest thing that absorbs carbon, and it's saved us over time because it's absorbed a lot of the carbon that we've put up into the atmosphere, and the carbon dioxide, to be specific. And so the weathering process of certain types of rocks, certain types of olivine or limestone, absorbs carbon in the weathering process. And if you speed up that process, like if you do, engineered systems to speed that up, you can speed up the process of how it absorbs the carbon and then is sequestered basically back into sand or into the ocean through like sinking. And there are several ways of geoengineering our planet that can speed up processes for decarbonization. And some of them seem like they would be relatively safe and, we can try these options out. It's basically called interventions, like intervening into what nature is naturally doing and trying to create faster systems in order to fix some of the ways we've actually geoengineered our planet.
Yeah, that's one of the quotes that I remember from last season, and I think it was Brett Howell of Howell Conservation Fund said something along the lines of, we had to collaborate as a species to get us to the point where the environment is now. It was all of us that were using fossil fuels and contributing to these problems. So now we have to collaborate to get ourselves out of it and work together. And it's kind of this tricky thing because whenever you're intervening in Earth systems, it's really hard to know what the next level effects of that are. Like, we're solving this problem, but are we creating another one? So how difficult is it to look at the science behind all of these projects that are applying for the Keeling Curve Prize? Do you have a whole team of people that are looking at them and assessing them for impact and viability and stuff like that?
To answer your question of how difficult, it's very, very difficult. And you need to be a really big systems thinker. And I have a team of 12 analysts that are from around the world. They all have real jobs. They work as contractors for me. And they all have different areas of expertise, which allows for us to look at all the solutions through different lenses. And, we evaluate things like, how is the nature-based aspect of this going to weigh as far as, something that's engineered? And what do we look at as far as the scalability and maybe even the business model? We look at the strength of the team and their expertise, and we look at all kinds of different sort of qualifications from these solutions. And we talk about, are we creating another problem, or are we looking at the solutions? We did have a long conversation a couple years ago about the issues around hydrogen. And there are big problems that could be created from having this global hydrogen economy. It's not all good. There's a lot of cons to the idea of putting hydrogen out there in bigger amounts. It's similar problems to oil and gas. So we have to be very careful. And the team is incredibly good at trying to look at all the aspects of both the pros and cons and discussing why something shouldn't become a prize winner, because we don't want to elevate it in a way that is too much about just the Band-Aids and not the overall fix of the problem, which is actually reducing the fossil fuels, and the agricultural processes that are also creating a big heat trapping issue.
Speaking of fossil fuels, one of your big commitments is looking at a future without fossil fuels. So what does that look like to you?
Well, I'm the chairman of the airport board in Aspen, Colorado, and I'm trying to get people involved in creating an airport that's entirely better in our world. So we're looking at sustainable aviation fuels and how that could actually decarbonize in the near term. And then in the long term, could it be electric aviation with smaller flights, and how do we electrify everything so that we still have the power we need. The lights are on and the heat is on. Heat pumps are a really great way for heating and cooling that are far more efficient. And so basically what I look at is all the solutions that already exist, how we can scale those up in places in the world that need that scaling, that they have energy poverty and they're looking to advance their own lives and economy, and how we can be less consumptive and more present and involved in our own sort of carbon footprint in a way that just balances things out and not too painful, but more clean and healthy, and slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, and really take the time to exist and just kind of be where you are and be happy with, the connections that you have and stuff like that.
Let me tell you one story about, I think we're going to get to the bike ride that I just did in the last few days, but one story is that I was biking up north from Salt Lake City, and I was thinking about how the landscape was very much like the south of France. It had similar kind of plants, and there was a look in the sky of the kind of haziness of the south of France. And I was just like, people could bike here, except for there's no wineries because it's Utah, but it has that same kind of atmosphere and landscape and feeling about it, and it was quite pretty. And I thought, if we didn't have so much need to move faster and grow, if it was more of a pullback and have family farms and, live a little less consumptive and a more kind of meaningful life, and value the earth that we live on, and value nature, and value our humanity in our own localities.
I completely agree with that. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that kind of place-based enjoyment. I love that we live in Columbus, Georgia, because we live right by the Chattahoochee River. And I think that river is kind of the through line of our community. And I think that's something that it's important to bring attention to, is just to take stock of where you are and really enjoy it for what it is. You mentioned a bike ride, and I've been sitting on this so far because I really wanted to put a little bit of a spotlight on the Global Warming Mitigation Project. But you don't just talk the talk and finance these amazing projects. You walk the walk, or bike the bike as well. And so you biked here to Sun Valley, Idaho from Salt Lake City, Utah, which was how many miles?
It was about 300. So
why did you choose to bike here as opposed to taking traditional means of transportation?
Nah, this was a little crazy. So as a climate scientist and, running a climate organization, I'm trying to cut back on my footprint. I know that there's people that are just very, they're very down on how people are traveling around and talking about, we have to sacrifice, we have to do this. And I was just like, I need to cut down on my own travel to be really real in my mission, although it's very hard because, you want to get the word out and everything. So when I was invited to be on the main stage here at the Sun Valley Forum in order to talk about the winners and announce our Keeling Curve Prize winners this year, I was like, how can I get there without flying? And I decided that it might be fun to try and ride a bike. And it turns out that it's really far. But what my husband and I did is we rode our bikes to the train station, which was about 40 miles from where we live, and took the train from Glenwood Springs to Salt Lake City. And then we rode the 300 miles here. And they're electric bikes, which would make it sound like it might be easier, but it was incredibly difficult because there's not really an infrastructure for bike riding. And I would like to see that improved. That would be part of my beautiful future, is that the infrastructure for bike riding would be better. But it was also really great in some ways because we saw the countryside. We had incredible experiences along the way. I have gotten in better shape in the last few months. And I think that that's a really big part of both mental and physical well-being, because riding a bike is actually really good for your emotional state of mind.
Tell me more about that. Why is it so good for it?
I think there's something about just like the circulation and the thinking and the like looking around and the slowing down. There's something really, really good emotionally about slowing down.
So are you looking forward to the bike ride back the next 300 miles, or are you like, oh no, why did I do this?
That's a great question. I think that it's our trailer died in the last 20 miles, and we actually had to call the hotel that I'm staying at to come pick it up because it wasn't going to make it all the way. We're working on getting that either fixed or getting a new trailer to take our stuff back. So we're trying to figure that out. And we're trying to figure out the route better, because on our first day, hate to throw Google Maps under the bus, but it took us in ways that really weren't very possible. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to figure out a better route back. And we might even take an extra day to try and get home because it's really difficult. I'm glad that we don't have as much of a deadline on where we have to be, so that if something does go wrong, we can kind of take our time a little bit. But I do have a board meeting when I get back, so I do have to be back for that.
Yeah.
So I'm not answering the question because I'm not sure yet how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Is this the first time you've done this sort of extended physical endurance thing? Or do you have a history of doing long bike rides or stuff like that?
I ran a marathon when I was 25, and I've hiked to Everest Base Camp when I was 21, and I've always been pretty athletic and active. This is the first long bike trip like this, and there are different challenges. I mean, sitting on a bike saddle for a long time is kind of hard on your body and your bootay, and it was incredibly difficult, some of the places where we were in the middle of nowhere. And I have to say, too, the 105-degree temperatures, the heat, and the heat that we're experiencing globally right now, it was debilitating at times. We had to find places where there was sprinklers going on farms and stand in the water for a while.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So what were your strategies to mitigate, to deal with this heat? Was it a scheduling thing? Was it water breaks? Going into this knowing that you're riding bikes through the West in 100+ degree temperatures, what was your plan going into it? And were there any things that you had to change as you did?
Everything had to change. It was absolutely crazy. So our train from Glenwood was 7 hours late. And our plan was that we were going to take the train and get in at about midnight into Salt Lake City and start riding at midnight. So we'd be riding in the night and be at our next destination by 10 in the morning before it got to be 105 degrees. Well, that didn't happen. We ended up getting in at 6:30 in the morning. We got in our bikes and started riding. So we were riding in the heat. And we picked destinations where we could charge our bikes up and sit and cool off for a little while. One time we were charging our bikes up, sitting at a country store, and a sheriff in the area who was in an unmarked car asked us if we were homeless.
Nice. That's fun.
And we ended up having a great conversation with him, and he gave us his card telling us that if we needed help to give him a call. So it was fun meeting the people, but we had to change our strategy all over the place and be very resilient. There was one time when I was so hot driving along and there was a billboard, and I told my husband, I said, we have to sit under the billboard so that I can cool off in the shade, because there was no shade anywhere. And it turned out to be a Northrop Grumman billboard that was near where they do some of their work, I guess their material building. And there happened to be a place where we could charge our bikes on a pole, an electric pole.
Oh, wow.
So we charged our bikes, and we hoped that they didn't care that we were taking a little bit of their energy.
I'm sure they would be glad to know that they supported this bike ride to present the prize. I'm sure that they would be glad about that.
They actually, near there was one of the biggest solar farms I'd ever seen. And I was thinking that they probably get their power from this solar power station. So, that's part of the future too, is creating these innovations in companies that you would never think would do this kind of green energy.
Yeah. Our sister-in-law actually did a bike ride when she was in college from Texas to Alaska. So while we were preparing for this interview, we were like, what questions should we be asking? You know, what do you wish someone had asked you? And she was like, well, you know, people are always asking, like, how far was it? Was it hard? And all of that. And she was like, I want to know, like, what food did you crave? What are things that you wish you had with you? Or like when you did get to a stopping point, you were like, oh my God, thank you.
That's such a good question. And it's so interesting because it did vary. There was like the first day when we didn't get in until really, really late. We were on our bikes for about 15 hours. I didn't crave anything. I was nauseous and I actually threw up a little bit because it was like, and I was like, oh, this isn't good. But I did crave like ginger ale or something to settle my stomach. Mm-hmm. And then at that point too, I did want something like kind of creamy foods. Mm-hmm. Like at one point I ate a cup of clam chowder because it seemed like a really good thing to sort of coat my stomach. But there were times too where it was like, God, I feel like we need a little protein. I mean, my husband was definitely craving more protein than I was, but it's an interesting question because it did vary depending on how exerted I was.
Yeah. I have to say that if you had made me guess what foods I thought you were craving on a bike ride, clam chowder would literally never in a million years have come up. But that's fascinating.
Yeah, if you had given me like a multiple choice list and you're like, okay, and it had 6 options, and it was like 5 of these are things that she ate, I would have been like, well, it's not clam chowder.
I never would have, and I never drink like sodas or anything. Yeah. I got like a Mountain Dew one time because I was just like, okay, I need something that's bubbly and a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah.
I'm a really big advocate for like trying to put yourself into situations that really strip away a lot of stuff from modern life. In my modern life, I am never mineral or energy deficient in anything ever. I can go to a vending machine or a gas station and I can get as much sodium and sugar and protein as I want to get. And when we've done stuff like long hikes or, you know, backpacking or anything like that, the experiences where you're an organism that is looking for this specific, you know, macronutrient or sodium or whatever to just keep your machinery running is really, for me, very humbling. And it brings me back to this idea that like we're not separate from nature. We are nature. And it's really important, I think, to keep that at the forefront of your mind and to do that by pushing yourself to your limits like that. I think that's really cool.
Yes, and I've always been a big fan of listening to what your body is kind of looking to crave, and it's telling you what it needs, and we are a part of like a bigger system of what we need from the earth.
Really, it makes me just want to buy a bike and ride back with you. I can't do that. I have too much stuff with me, but
I definitely could not. I don't do well in the heat on a good day, and so riding at night I think I could do, but riding during like the heat of the day, I would not be in good shape.
You know, let me add a little bit to the heat issue because it was really interesting to me about the first day when the heat was up around 105. This was as this heat dome was coming into the Salt Lake City area. It wasn't as bad because the air was cooler and we're moving. And so the air is a little bit cooler on you. And I mean, it wasn't, 80. But the air was cooler, and so while we were riding, it was better. When we stopped, we felt the heat more. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, the heat dome had kind of like heated up the air as well. And so the air was much hotter on the second day that we were riding. And I felt like that was really hard to get enough water. This is the day where we were like finding sprinklers to like stand in. And it just felt so much hotter, like that furnace, like a furnace was on you a lot of the time.
Yeah. I was curious about the term heat dome, so I did a little digging. A heat dome is a weather phenomenon that happens when a high-pressure system sits over a large area for an unusually long period of time. It stops clouds from forming and traps heat beneath it, acting like a lid on a skillet to bump up the temperature. This summer, a heat dome sat over a big chunk of the western U.S. In Salt Lake City, where Jaquelyn started her ride, the average temperature was 6.4 degrees higher than it's been over the past 30 years.
And so, in the world with climate change, as these heat domes last longer, it's going to create a system where it is just really too hot to be outside. And it's going to be too hot for workers around the world to be able to do an 8-hour shift outside in the daytime.
Yeah, it kind of takes me back to, watching nature documentaries of like big game in Africa. And you hear David Attenborough that's like, in the heat of the day, the lion takes a nap under the shade of the trees. Because it's like there is no strategy other than don't be active when it's that hot outside. You just have to find ways to not be doing things. And I think that that's going to be a big challenge for humanity as we move forward, is the unstoppable gears of, industry are going to have to come to a stop, or at least slow down a little bit when it comes to dealing with having human beings outside in 105-degree temperatures. There's just no reasonable way to be safe doing anything outside in those temperatures for extended periods of time.
It's crazy because we know this. So let's stop doing the things that cause this.
Right. It's one of those things where we're looking at the short-term financial gain and prioritizing that over the long-term damages that are occurring. And so we're having to shift the paradigm of how we think about the cost of that short-term gain,
Yeah, we have to value humanity and lives and the planet over money. We just have to.
Yeah. I'm the kind of person that I get a little too introspective sometimes. And I think if I were on a bike for several days on a journey to, kind of walk the walk and prove that there are ways to get around without contributing to some of these climate issues, I would be really like philosophical in my mind thinking about what was happening. Did you like come up with any nuggets of wisdom or anything that you felt like you weren't expecting? Any thoughts like that as you were writing?
I often think a lot while I'm on a bike too, because for some reason it gets your brain kind of moving and thinking. And, I do think a lot while I'm on a bike, and I think about the world around us, and I think about like what I'm seeing. And there's just a lot of time to look at the landscape and come up with like why this is happening and why that is happening. And I'm not sure that this particular ride I like had any new awareness. I was definitely thinking about the winner's announcement going into this conference and, what the world is going to look like in the future and why people can do something about it. If we can put our mind to doing something that's really, really difficult, then we can solve the climate crisis.
I want to hear a little bit more about what's next for the Global Warming Mitigation Project. But before that, I wanted to go back to bike riding and being in the heat of the day and what did you do to keep yourself cool? Because I'm thinking like, oh, you don't want the sun on you, so you're going to wear like long sleeves or something like that. But long sleeves probably make you a little more warm. Like, did you have chilly towels? What was your strategy with that?
I actually am not one to really like wear a sports bra and nothing else, but I did. I sunscreened up and wore a sports bra with, bike shorts, and I am not one to normally do that. But it's too hot to wear anything.
Yeah.
A shirt was just too hot.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically stripped down.
Yeah.
And we drank a lot of water. All the time I had a water bottle like right near me and stuff like that. And we would stop and get water all the time. I told you about the sprinkler dancing.
Yeah.
Whenever we would see a sprinkler and we would, be able to not go on somebody's property, but just have like the coolness, get our whole body as like wet as possible.
Yeah.
Dry in like 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. But it was certainly not easy. And it was a challenge to stay cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny because, people like to talk about humans compared to other animals and mammals as like, oh, we have no defenses, we have no like major adaptations other than our ability to think and see really well. And what humans actually are really well adapted for is endurance in heat. Not necessarily in the heat that we're seeing now because it's kind of a new thing, but like distance running. In the early days of humanity, we were persistence hunters, which meant we just chased an antelope until they no longer had the energy to keep running, and we did. And that's part of why we're hairless, largely, is it allows us to sweat and evaporate and cool ourselves off. And our gait is evolved to use very little energy so that we're not running top speed, we're not sprinting, but we can maintain a jog for way longer than basically anything else on the planet. Like, we really are terrifying persistence sports. So when you were like, you know what, I just sports bra, bike shorts, and we went with it, that's kind of what we're adapted to do, as long as we're able to get enough water and take breaks and stuff like that. I think that that's really a cool, like, coming back to being part of nature and just using what nature has given you to accomplish this incredible feat of hundreds of miles of bike riding.
You know what else we have too is we have this like ability in our minds to set a goal and achieve it. So when we really say, I'm going to do this, I can do this, we really can. I mean, there were definitely times on the ride where I was just like, oh, this is going to be super hard, but I only had 10 more miles, I can do this, or something like that. And there is this human ability for us to actually achieve goals when we want to.
Yeah, and I think that expands out beyond just physical things. I think hard things like decarbonizing our transportation systems or our agricultural systems is part of that. It's hard, but we absolutely can do it. And not only can we do it, there's people right now who have already figured out the solutions that we need to make that happen. And Global Warming Mitigation Project is helping to fund those and get them off the ground and get attention to these amazing solutions that already exist.
And I have to say that it's only a choice of, do we want to spend the money on it? And as I said earlier, money is only good if the planet is good. Money is only good if we spend it in the right ways. And so we have these solutions, and most of them are doable with more money. And everything when it starts up needs subsidization. And that's what we need to do, is we need to subsidize some of these solutions in order for them to work and not worry about what it costs us, because the cost of not having a planet to live on is insurmountable.
Way higher. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to kind of end on what's next for Global Warming Mitigation Project and what gives you hope that we can have a better future.
So we started with the Keeling Curve Prize, and we've grown into having a internship program, which is called the Constellations Fellowship. And we allow interns to get work with all the finalists and the winners of the prize. That's become an incredibly successful program. We get thousands of young people that are trying to get jobs in these organizations and advance their own climate careers.
That's amazing.
And it's been so amazing for both the projects and programs and the young people that are working on them. So it's been a really amazing program. We hope to grow that. And we're looking at our database, which has about 1,640 projects in it. And we're trying to value that in a more effective way, because out of the 1,640 projects, we've had 70 winners to date who've received the $50,000 that we just give out annually per winner. And we're trying to figure out how to get more money to not only flow into the database to these projects and programs that are in there that have already been scored and vetted, but create something that's like a pooled carbon fund that is a new mechanism in the voluntary carbon markets. So I know I'm kind of getting into some jargon right now, but we're actually trying to really grow the ability for corporations to decarbonize through supporting a lot of these programs and projects in a diversified portfolio model. And if this really takes off, this could be a much better way for corporations to decarbonize their own Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 footprints through getting money into the programs and projects that are actually reducing, removing, and replacing the greenhouse gases.
Yeah. Would that be kind of similar to carbon credits?
It would be similar.
Okay.
It's an offset, inset supply chain play that we would work with corporations and really kind of customize what they're looking for. And it would help de-risk, because there would be more projects in a portfolio, and that would help de-risk their whole ability to offset their carbon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If somebody wanted to follow what you're doing, learn more about it, perhaps apply, where would we send them to get more information?
Our website is gwmp.org, and that's full of information.
Perfect. So you guys can scroll down to the show notes. I'll drop that link right there so you can go straight from listening. Click on that. You can go learn more about the Global Warming Mitigation Project. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today. This has been such a fun conversation to have in the backdrop of you halfway through this massive bike ride. I hope you have happy trails on the way home and no flat tires.
We didn't even talk about the flat tires. We had 3. But thank you so much for having us.
Let's see if we can reduce that by 3 for the ride home.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I just cannot imagine riding a bike in 100-degree temperatures and being like, you know what I want to eat? Chowder.
Yeah, clam chowder is wild.
That is unhinged. But our bodies are really good at being like, this is what I need right now.
Yeah. And if that didn't make her sick, then great. It made her body happy.
Solved a problem.
Yep. I think something that was really clear in this episode is how we're sincerely lacking the infrastructure in the United States to do trips like this. I mean, I even think if we are downtown here in Georgia or pretty much anywhere else we visit, like sometimes there's a bike lane, but oftentimes it's just like, I don't know, fend for yourself. And then also there's signs that say bikes can't ride on the sidewalk. So it's like, where can you ride? Because me personally, if I'm driving and a bike goes past me,
you get really mad.
So I'm not mad because like someone is biking and they're in my way. I get mad because I'm nervous I'm going to hit them. Like it makes me really uncomfortable to be like in this huge box, and there's just this little delicate bike driving beside me.
Right. You're not mad at the cyclist.
Right.
You're upset at the system that doesn't have a better place for that cyclist to ride.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think it's pretty common for infrastructure to not have been forward thinking enough, at least in the United States, to do anything other than rely on a car to get where you need to go. It is definitely not easy here to do anything else.
Right, because we progress so quickly of like, wow, we have these cars now, and so we're going to build roads for cars, and like, we're coming into this new age of having all these new shiny things, so why would anyone want to ride a bike anywhere when you can ride a car now, right? And we're trying to sell that American dream.
Right, yeah, that's definitely, it's billed as the ultimate in freedom is being able to take your car and go wherever you want to go. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of value in that and having that ability to get where you want to be and not rely on others' schedules. However, there are heavy costs that come along with that, and it makes things way harder for people that either don't have the ability to own a vehicle or don't want to own a vehicle to do what they need to do in their daily life.
Right. And her story of having the train be 7 hours late.
Right,
that they
that's
were
the other
like,
part.
okay, we're planning, we're going to leave late at night, so we get there at midnight and we can start biking. And by the train being 7 hours late, well, they're trying to get to Sun Valley by a certain point. It's not like they can be like, oh, we'll just wait till midnight tonight later and like sleep through the day. Like they have to adjust their whole schedule, and now they're riding in the heat of the day.
I'm stressed out when like we're late going to a friend's house for dinner and I have a car.
Right.
Can you imagine how stressed out I would be if we were a full like 7 to 12 hours behind for an award that our nonprofit was going to go present, and we have 300 miles to bike? I would be a bundle of stress the entire time.
Yeah, it's like, well, I've already committed to biking the whole way. It's not like I can change my plan and be like, oh, you know what, I'll just drive now.
Yeah, that would be rough.
So speaking of that award, the application for the Keeling Curve Prize opens on November 1st.
Also, happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
How did we not say that earlier? This is our Halloween episode. We should have done bats this episode.
Oh, yeah.
If you are looking for a good Halloween bat episode, it's not really Halloween, but if you listen to it on Halloween, it counts. Go listen to Saving Bats from Wind Farms, Dr. Sarah Fritz from last season. It's a great episode.
There you go. It's not really spooky at all, but it is about bats.
That counts.
Yeah.
If you like the content that we put out, we are a nonprofit. We survive off of your support. If you guys want to buy some really cool merch, you can go to our website. Link is in the show notes. We've got t-shirts. We have reusable cups, stickers. We've got some really cool stuff up there.
You can also support us by leaving a review wherever you listen to the show, or if you just want to say hi, then you can text us on the hotline.
That phone number is 706-505-8255. 0582. Shoot us a text. I want to talk to you.
And if you let us know how you found the show or send us a screenshot or something of you sharing the show with one of your friends, we'll happily send you a free sticker pack.
And I don't mean to brag, but our stickers are dope.
They're pretty cool.
They are really cool. Who do we have next week, Sarah Catherine?
Next week, we'll be releasing our interview with Dr. Max Holmes, who is the president and CEO of Woodwell Climate Research Center. The interview with him was really interesting and a topic that I personally did not know too much about, so you hear plenty of questions from me. We talk a lot about carbon credits and offsets, which I think is kind of a confusing topic for a lot of people and has a lot of like voodoo around it and is generally misunderstood. So this was a really cool story for us to tell, and I'm really excited for our audience to hear it.
Yeah, carbon credits and carbon offsets are kind of a sensitive topic because some people feel like it's a cop-out. And other people feel like this is the only way to get the amount of money into the system that we need. And Dr. Holmes has some really cool insights into how the system works, why it's so important, etc.
Right. And it's not all that they do and all that we talk about. So there is plenty other content in that episode for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember the right words, but he was like in charge of the Antarctic Science Division of like looking at how the climate patterns in Antarctica are so critical to the ocean's circulation. Yeah, hey, it's a cool sciencey episode.
Yeah, he has done a lot of work in this field.
So with all that, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see y'all next week.